Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today, and welcome back to Dominions 5. And today we are doing a basic ModNation analysis. I don't do ModNations very often. I mean, I play games with ModNations in them, but I don't often go in depth with them because, well, frankly, because Dominions 5 is already a complicated enough game, and adding a whole bunch of mods just makes it more complicated, in my opinion. This is also why I don't play Dominions Enhanced. Dominions Enhanced, for those who don't know, is a very, very large overhaul mod that adds, like, doubles the amount of spells in the game, adds a whole bunch of new nations, a lot of stuff. It's very well done, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of respect for the people who made it, but Dominions 5 is big enough, and I don't think it's necessary. But, if you'll recall, a while back I played a game called Mirror Point, which was created by my friend Haerdalas, and included a whole bunch. It was basically a compilation pack of a whole bunch of mods that he had made, and he wanted to play those mods, all kind of in the Middle Age, against vanilla nations to see kind of how well balanced they were. Now, some of those nations were designed for early age, some were designed for late age, so obviously the balance wasn't going to be perfect, but by throwing them all in there, we got to play them against each other, we got to mess around. It was a lot of fun. I played Hollow Nest, a nation based off of Hollow Knight, in that game, and I enjoyed it a lot. I did pretty well. I think I was still on the board. We called the game at some point. We didn't finish it out. We decided on a negotiated draw. But I was on the board. I was one of the major players. I wouldn't say I was winning the game at that point, but I was doing pretty well. And I had a lot of fun. It was the first time I've ever actually cast Astral Nexus in a game of Dominions 5. But in any case, Haerdalas has invited me back to another Mirror Point game because he has added to and expanded that mod of his, the Mirror Point mod, with a whole bunch of new nations. So we had Anolando, Drangleic, Lothric, Hollow Nest before, and Skyrim, but we've now added Val, Blood and Gems, Tech Duin, the Mound Kings, which is basically Ermor but elves in the late age, and, so Val is an early age nation, Tech Duin is a late age nation, and the nation that I'll be playing, Ashina, the Fountainhead Waters, which is a nation based off of the game Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, which came out, I think, last year. Yeah, it came out in 2019, I believe. Hasn't been out a super long time. And it's an interesting game. I've watched gameplay of it. I have never played it myself, but I kind of have an idea. This nation obviously will include some spoilers for Sekiro in some degree, so if you haven't played the game and you want to avoid spoilers, plug your ears. So, Ashina, the Fountainhead Waters. In the background here, in the Dominions background, it's just recently broken away from Jomon, and Shinoyama before it, and it's been pulled away by the house Ashina, the Ashina family. And so they have a very Jomonese look to them, right? And just looking here, you kind of expect them to play in a way that's, well, like Jomon, but they don't. They're actually very, very different. There's a couple of reasons that is, and we'll go through them in order. But as you can see here, military, light and medium infantry, unarmored sacreds, crossbows in the presence of smiths. That's a big change from Jomon, and most units have some level of air shield. So all these guys down here, pretty much all of them, except I think these Ashina Ashigaru, all have a built-in air shield. It's not as effective as the spell air shield or the bless air shield. In this case, it's 40% for the Ashina Samurai. For the Nightjar Ninjas, it's 20%. For the Senpo Monks, the capital-only sacreds, it is 60%. But still, they have a percentage chance to evade missile fire, which means that in the late age, the era of massed crossbows and missile fire, these guys are a lot more durable than ye old average standard Jomonese infantry, even though they look exactly like Jomonese infantry. In addition, Ashina has very different paths than Jomon does. Jomon has pretty much every elemental path, and then also they have access to Astral, and I think they have a little bit of Death, if I recall correctly, but mainly it's all the elemental paths plus Astral, and Nature. Ashina basically has Death and Water. It says moderate Earth and Astral. It's not very moderate, it's fairly weak, as well as a little tiny bit of Nature and Fire from randoms, but mostly it's Death and Water, and they're easily recruitable. Mages are Death and Water. They do have this Herbalist guy who has Nature, but I'll be talking about these in order. So in order, you got the Ashigaru Commander. He has a Nodachi, he's just a commander. He has 40 leadership, he costs 40 gold. He has 20% air shield. He hits hard, like unusually hard, and has a decent attack skill because he's using a Japanese weapon, which Illwinter has given very high stat bonuses. But beyond that, nothing super special. You have the Ashina General, who is the same but better. Air shield 60, leadership 80. Does cost 80 gold, 1 rec point. Not a terrible choice. Slow, because he's wearing this heavy samurai armor, which slows him down, and also gives him pretty significant encumbrance. But still, the Ashina general does pretty well, plus with the 60% air shield, unlikely to be aced by a single arrow, which is nice. The Nightjar Commander. This is one of the interesting things about this nation. They have these Nightjar Commanders. 80 gold, 1 recruitment point assassins. Now, he's only Assassin 1, and he can't scale walls, so he's not the worst, most terribly annoying kind of assassin, but he does have 2 melee attacks, plus a shuriken ranged attacks, and pretty decent stealth score. So for 1 rec point, the ability to spam out 2 assassins per turn per fort if you really want to is powerful, can be powerful, and is especially powerful on a nation that has a lot of water gems, which Ashina does. So that's worth noting, worth potentially using. They also have a water bless point, and of course they have advanced forts, so they can get up to great citadels, since they are a late age nation. Ashina Priestesses, Holy 1, 100 gold, not much leadership, and an 80% chance to have 1 level of water. So the thing about Ashina in Sekiro is that many people in Ashina are obsessed with the search for immortality, and they worship a divine dragon, a being who lives in a heavenly space, and beings that are associated with the Fountainhead, which is a mystical spring or a mystical river. And the water from it is magical. So the Fountainhead waters are a very important, as you see here. In Ashina, most people worship the sacred Fountainhead waters, said to flow straight from the divine realm. So the Fountainhead waters are a big deal. Some people make it, brew it into sake. They can use it to bless people, in this case with the Ashina Priestesses. And a lot of people in the Ashina region are obsessed with it in-game. So water magic on the Ashina Priestesses. Other than that, just basic priestesses. The Herbalists are nature mages who are also disease healers, which is critically important because many of the important mages for the nation are, well, one unit in particular is very, very old. And so it's important that you have disease healer. Then we get into the mages. You have the Senpo priests, the Mibu priests, the Gaikokujin smiths, and the High Senpo priests, which are, both of these are, this actually is not only capital only, it can also be recruited on coasts, but this one is actually capital only. The Senpo priest is probably going to be your main recruit. Sacred, but not actually a priest, because the priests of Senpo Temple in Sekiro have abandoned their religious functions and have become obsessed with the search for immortality. So they've stopped being, you know, holy men. They're still sacred or considered sacred by the people, but they don't perform priestly rituals anymore. So the Senpo priests, interesting things about him: no protection, literally 0. Also low hit points. Good magic resistance, decent, yeah, I mean, that's fairly comparable to the average for mages. Excellent stats, actually, besides having no protection and human HP. 1 water, 1 death, and a random, so 100% of another water and death, and then 10% of getting a choice between astral and nature. So 1 out of 10 of these guys will also have a cool, nifty little other path. 1 out of 20 of them will be an astral mage, which unfortunately isn't really enough to do anything with, but is a neat kind of little fun bonus, I guess. Maybe by the very end of the game you can start using these guys as communion slaves. The main thing, though, is half of them are water 2, half of them are death 2. The water 2 ones are definitely less useful than the death 2, but, I mean, at least they can summon water elementals, so they can do something. The Mibu priests, on the other hand, are just straight up water 2. They have a 20% chance to be water 3. They are holy 2, they are priest level 2, so they have a couple of priest levels on them. They're also amphibious and have the gift of water breathing. So Mibu priests can go underwater, and they can also take small armies underwater, 10 units. They can take 10 guys underwater with them. They also, coincidentally, have 10 leadership. And of course you have your sacreds that I'll talk about in a little bit. So, these guys are interesting. They can potentially take you underwater in a fairly significant way. Now, they're expensive for what you get. 190 gold for a Water 2 mage. That is pricey. Very, very pricey. I'm not sure that I would recruit many of these unless I wanted to do some weird, you know, underwater attack strategy. The Gaikokujin smiths are basically Olmish master smiths. Weaker ones, they only have a 60% chance of an earth random, so they don't get a whole lot else, and they are heretical and negative inspirational, but they have the resource bonus and they have the forge bonus, so they get a cost reduction and they get they generate resources. They're actually a lot more like early age Olm's warrior smiths than they are middle age Olm's master smiths. But regardless, They're very useful. They cost almost no resources, interestingly. 110 gold for 2 paths with a 60% chance of being 3 paths is not bad. They are heretical, which can be a little bit of a downside, but that's easy to negate. The thing about them is, Gaikokujin Smiths unlock your crossbows. If you have one sitting in a fort, that fort can recruit these guys. Ashina Ashigaru with crossbows. They don't have air shield, unlike the others, but they have crossbows. They only cost 11 gold, 16 resources, so they're a pretty efficient crossbow, and they are, they're very good. I mean, especially for the late age, having access to a decent national crossbow is a solid perk. So these guys unlocking crossbows is very useful, plus they give that resource bonus, which can be useful because, as in the style of Jomon, many of your units are very resource intensive. Ashina Samurai costs 21 resources. Ashina Samurai with Naginatas only cost 18, which is better. But you cost more resources than you do gold, so that may be worth paying some attention to. Overall, I think you can mitigate the need for resources extensively by using other units, particularly Nightjar Ninjas and Senpo Monks, which require almost no resources. But if you want to, you can stack these guys up on a fort to give it a whole bunch of resources and start churning out the high-res cost units. So they also, of course, will give you earth buffs, earth power, the higher level earth spells, and a little bit of fire. Not a whole lot, but, you know, they can, I don't know, they can summon lesser fire elementals if you have to. They can sight search for fire. That's nice. The High Senpo Priest, then, is your main big heavy hitter monk. And honestly, it's pretty reasonable for a big heavy hitter monk. Yes, slow to recruit, 355 gold, Water 2, Death 2, and 3 randoms. Between Water Death 100%, Water Astral Death 100%, Astral Nature 100%, and then a 10% of an extra Water or Death. So let's run through the numbers here. Half of these guys are going to be at least Death 3. About 1 in 6 of them will end up being Death 4. A Death 4 mage breaks you into all the higher level death stuff, because Death 4 means that you can forge a Skull Staff, equip it, forge a Skull Face, equip that, now you're Death 6. Now you can cast every death spell, I think, in the game. In particular, you can get Well of Misery with Death 6, so now your death income spikes, and you can summon Liches and Wraith Lords and do all the late game things that Death wants to do with a Death 6 mage. So that's great. Also, the same percentage of them ends up being Water 4, which is less interesting, but does mean that you can at least shortcut the water boosting cycle. If you want to summon Queens of elemental Queens of Water or Sea Kings or what have you, you can just do that with High Senpo Priests. Actually, you can do it with Mibu Priests, because some of them can be Water 3. And a small fraction of these, so 1/3 and then a half of a third, so another 15%, end up being Astral 2, which would be a lot more useful if you had more reliable Communion Slaves, because you don't. You don't have Communion Slaves in this nation. But if you can get a hold of Communion Slaves, then High Senpo Priests could potentially commune into things. And even if they can't, having Astral means that they can use the Astral boost spells to buff up their paths during combat. They can use Power of the Spheres to become a higher level Death or Water Mage. If they random Astral 2, they can actually cast Light of the Northern Star and boost all Astral Mages in the battle. So that's nice. They can also random Nature, which is fairly low value, except that randoming Nature with their water means that these guys can cast Foul Vapors. So that is also a very useful ability. So basically, despite being a high-level water mage, or relatively high-level water mage, which usually is not a great thing, High Senpo Priests actually have no bad crosspaths. Like, there's nothing... Any of these randoms here works pretty well. The Nature one gives you Foul Vapors, which is very powerful. The Death ones give you higher-level Death Magic, which is never a bad thing. The Water randoms, if you hit both your Water randoms plus the Astral, that's probably the worst outcome. But even so, that gives you a Water 4 mage who can casually boost themselves up to Water 5 and, like, spam Living Water or something. And Living Water is a pretty decent spell. It gives you a whole bunch of guys with armor-piercing bludgeoning attacks, so that's not bad. So High Senpo Priests, very good. Senpo Priests, acceptably good. A little bit expensive for what they do, maybe. But honestly, 165 for 3 paths ain't bad. The Death 2s are definitely better than the Water 2s, but the Water 2s are still functional. Mibu Priests, very specialized. Gaikokujin Smiths, probably you're not going to want a ton of them, but having some Earth 2 floating around that you can use to drop buffs on your units is no bad thing. Having some Gaikokujin Smiths around is great, and it also gives you that forge bonus and some decent research. So, good, good, very good, could be worse, good, I mean, nothing to write home about, but if you want a priest, then Ashina priestesses are perfectly decent priests. In terms of units, Ashina Ashigaru with the Yaris. Yari is a good weapon. It's a spear with an attack bonus that's length 4, so fine. They have 12 protection, they're relatively cheap. Nothing to write home about, nothing to complain about. Ashina Ashigaru are actually pretty damn good. They have it's only a 10% air shield, so that's unfortunate, but they're not expensive for what they do, and what they do is they have a really high quality attack. Their defense skill is low, is the unfortunate thing, so they are going to die quickly. Probably wouldn't lean too heavily on them, but they're not terrible. Ashina Ashigaru with crossbows are just crossbows. They're crossbows. What do you want me to say? They do the crossbow things, which is armor-piercing damage at long range. It's really good. I love crossbows. Crossbows into minions are quite powerful, especially if you can layer the proper spells on them. Ashina Samurai are like Jomon Samurai. They're an excellent unit, and they actually mitigate the weakness of Jomonese Samurai very, very well. They cost 14 gold, and they only have a defense skill of 12. So in melee, they are gonna suffer a little bit, but they have a great attack. Attack 14, 19 damage, half the time it's pierce, half the time it's slash. If you can buff these guys a little bit with, Astral, Water, they're a Feudal warrior class apparently, I should point that out to Haerdalas. You buff them a little bit with some of your spells, and then they can go to town on people. Just really go ham on them. Same with the Ashina Samurai with Naginatas. If you have somebody who has a lower defense score, and you want the extra damage, these Naginatas can do a great job just hacking into them. And since you have Earth, you can easily buff these guys with Strength of Giants and Legions of Steel, so that you can get their prot up to, 18, and their damage up to 27, which is, or actually it would be more than 27, this is a double-handed weapon. It would be more like 29? I think 29, or 28, 29, so I'm not sure how it would round, but something like that. And that's pretty damn solid. Your last two units are your most interesting. The Nightjar Ninjas here, they cost quite a bit of gold and recruitment points, low resource cost. They're faster than your other units. One of the downsides of your heavily armored units here is they are slow, combat speed 9 there, 10 there, so average on the Ashina Ashigaru, but 9 on these guys. Nightjar Ninjas are a little bit faster. They're stealthy. Their air shield is a little bit lower than the others, but they have, like their commanders, 2 decent piercing melee attacks, plus a piercing ranged attack that actually gets 2 attacks. The Nightjar Shuriken throws 2 missiles per throw. And the Nightjar Kama and the Dagger, of course, are, short range, but quite efficient attacks. So, if you have gold, but not a lot of resources, Nightjar Ninjas are actually pretty effective in close combat. They are let down by their low protection, as is kind of a trend. Low protection and low defense skill, I've noticed, is sort of an Ashina trend. So Nightjar Ninjas will once again take fairly heavy casualties, but they'll also inflict a lot of damage. And if you can drop a few, if you drop a few buffs on them, then I think they can probably do quite well. Now, of course, you don't have the greatest buff paths in your general purpose mages, but like I said, the Gaikokujin Smiths with the Earth 2, those guys can do a pretty good job of buff support in your army, With Nightjar Ninjas, for example, if you throw like Iron Warriors and Strength of Giants on these Nightjar Ninjas, they'll become very, very frightening, because then you have something with prot 25 or so, and 14 strength with piercing attacks. So that would be a pretty dangerous unit. The final troop in the roster, final recruitable troop, is the Senpo Monk. This is a capital-only sacred, and so here's the thing about the Senpo Monk, right? Once again, 0 protection, and only 12 hit points, so absolutely going to die if they get hit. But unlike other units in Ashina, the Senpo Monk has a high defense skill, base defense skill of 14, and decent attack skill. Only costs 26 gold, which is quite low for a sacred, to be honest. And 2 attacks. One is a magical piercing attack, and one is Senpo Martial Arts, which is basically a copy of the Koppo attack. It's armor piercing, and it gives the enemy a limp when it hits. Now, it is attack -2 and damage -3. But still, This in conjunction with a 60% air shield. The 60% air shield and the high defense skill means that Senpo monks are actually a lot more durable than they look, because in melee they're hard to hit, and at range they're hard to hit. Especially if you give them like a Windrunner Bless or something that increases their speed. So, Senpo monks, despite having 0 protection, in my opinion, could actually be worth blessing really heavily. Because think about it, they've got high attack density, 6 attacks per square. They've got high base stats. One of their attacks is armor piercing. They're very likely to kill enemy infantry that they hit. In terms of what bless to give them, I think there are a few different possibilities that we'll talk about when we get to Pretender God generation. But those are your troops. In terms of troops, the most notable ones, I think, are the Ashina Samurai with katanas. These are just good, solid, meaty frontline chaff. Ashigaru with crossbows, and the Senpo monks. Nightjar ninjas, I think, are decent raiders, because they're stealthy, and you can lead them with these guys who have 40 leadership and are stealthy. But Senpo monks, I think, are definitely going to be a major part of your strategy in a way that squishy human sacreds often aren't. Just because they have the 2 attacks and the air shield, magic damage, and armor piercing damage. All of which are great qualities. In terms of what you get, your Ashina Castle allows recruitment of your smiths and gives you 1 water per turn. And Senpo Temple gives you... See, it says that enables recruitment of Senpo monks. That's those guys. That gives you 2 water and 2 death. So you end up with 3 water and 2 death per turn from your sites. In terms of Pretender God chassis, unfortunately, you only get the standard Eastern chassis. You do get a national discount on the Celestial Carp. Regrettably, it is not enough to make the Celestial Carp worth taking. Which is too bad, because there is actually a giant Sacred Carp in Sekiro, and it would be kind of cool to take this guy as your god. But he's just not worth it. He's just bad. In terms of national spells, Ashina does not have many. They only have 2, I believe. They have Fountainhead Guardians and Fountainhead Host. Oh, they also have Contract Legendary Shinobi. All 3 of these are summons. Fountainhead Guardians summons 2 Okami, which we'll talk about those in just a second. I'm going to swap over to the Mod Inspector to show you the units. Fountainhead Host summons 14 Okami, an Okami Leader, and 2 Fountainhead Nobles. And Contract Legendary Shinobi summons 1 of, I believe, 5 Legendary Ninjas who have different magic paths, different abilities, and different special qualities. So, let's look at the Mod Inspector. Oh my god, I have so many things popped up here. Go through them in order. When you cast Fountainhead Host or Fountainhead Warriors, you get 2 Fountainhead Warriors, you get 2 of these guys. Okami Archers, Okami Warriors, 2 randomly selected. There's an Okami Warrior with a katana. There's an Okami Warrior with a Naginata, who has slightly lower attack, of course, but more damage. And there's the Okami Archer, who has a longbow. The interesting things about the Okami, okay? First of all, they're all female. I'm not sure why, but they're all tagged as female. They're all sacred. They're all amphibious. They all have air shield. The ones with katanas have air shield 40. I think the ones with Naginatas and the archers both have air shield 20. They are vulnerable to poison, but in terms of their stats, let's just pull the Okami Archer up here into the center. They have over 20 hit points, they're size 3, decent protection because they wear samurai armor, and they have elite stats, so very high precision for the Okami Archers. With this longbow, they are going to do some work. Attack skill and defense skill both pretty solid, higher on the melee units, 12 and 14 versus 11 and 13, and their combat speed is also quite high. It's combat speed 15. Even in their armor. Their base is actually 18. They also have high magic resistance and morale. So they're elite units, and tough ones. Summonable for 6 gems for 2. So that's, in my opinion, not an awful price. It is interestingly geared to be cast by Mibu Priests. They're the only ones who can cast this spell because they're your only holy 2 water 2s. I guess you could prophetize a high Senpo monk or a Senpo monk who randomed water 2. But I wouldn't really bother. Just use Mibu priests to do it. So, this is honestly a pretty good deal. Oh, I guess the Naginata guys actually have Air Shield 30. Especially because, like I said, they're sacred, so if you bought a Bless for your Senpo monks, you can also apply the Bless to these Okami warriors, and they definitely deserve a Bless. They're tough enough, they hit hard enough, I mean, these guys have like 30 damage on their Naginatas. They're absolutely worth blessing, and so they're worth summoning if you've already taken a bless for your monks. Fountainhead Host summons a whole bunch of them, and that's cool. It summons 14 of them. Mipu Priests cast it. It costs 60 water gems, which sounds kind of steep at first when you say 14 Okami warriors. Okay, yeah, they're tough, they're sacred, they're worth blessing, fine. It's not expensive. It's actually really cheap. 60 water gems is pretty cheap for what you get. Because what you get is you get 1 Okami leader and you get 2 Fountainhead nobles. Now, the Okami leader is an Okami warrior, except slightly higher stats, actually slightly lower protection, interestingly. I wonder why that is. I think it's because Haerdalas forgot to give the Okami leader the 2 basic nat prot that the warriors got, but that's fine. That's a very small difference. High base magic resistance, very high base stats, and Air 2, Holy 1. So the Okami leader can bless themselves, and they can also cast air buffs. They can also cloud trapeze. So this is a tailor-made size 3 thug chassis. Absolutely designed for thugging. Also, low encumbrance, because their base encumbrance is only 1. The base encumbrance of Okami is quite low. So, excellent, excellent thug chassis. The Fountainhead Nobles, meanwhile, are just excellent mages. They're Air 2, Water 3. They are, of course, amphibious. They're blunt resistant because they're rubbery and squishy. They have a life drain, built-in attack, but their stats are so low that you wouldn't want them in melee. But they're great mages, and they are these mages right here are your only national access to air. So if you summon these guys, then you can start casting air spells, which before you had no access to. Or almost no access to, I should say, because you do have a hero who has air magic. So, Fountainhead Nobles, Okami Leaders, the Fountainhead Host spell is definitely worth casting, and since your water gem income starts off pretty good, you're very likely to have the gems built up to be able to cast this by the time you hit Conjuration 6. And it's worth casting, because then you get these nice mages, you get some cool sacred soldiers, it's all good. Then, that spell, Contract Great Shinobi, that costs 21 death gems, gets you one of these guys. You got Owl, Sekiro, the namesake of the game and main character, Lady Butterfly, Orangutan the Masterless Shinobi, and, oh, I'm trying to remember what the last one's name is. Kingfisher. Oh, wait, stop it. Kingfisher, yes, Masterless Shinobi Kingfisher. There we go. Okay, so all of these do different things. Owl has Astral Death and Nature Magic, which is useful. Very high stealth, causes fear. Has Patience 5, is an assassin that can scale walls, and has high hit points for a size 2 unit and is very strong with high stats. He uses a Nodachi. He also has an Owl attack, which is intrinsic, a net to entangle people, and a shuriken that has 2 attacks. He wears full leather armor, so his prot is fairly low, but he can buff himself. And of course, he is, as I said, an assassin. Funny thing about Owl, though, Owl costs, and I'm not sure it's going to show me here, Owl has an upkeep of 400 a year, unlike pretty much anybody else. So per turn, he costs you like, what is it, 30-some gold per turn just to maintain Owl. Yeah, gold cost 500. That's what determines the upkeep. He's the only one of these guys with a gold cost. So he demands a whole bunch of money to work for you, but he is a paramount assassin. He's fast, he's excellent in melee, he can cast Swarm, he's really, really good at assassinating. And he has, of course, the air shield, so people shooting arrows at him don't really bother him much. Sekiro, the one-armed wolf, is unique because he is also very stealthy. He has Patience. He is an assassin who can scale walls. He's also a poor amphibian, and he's immortal. Now, it says chance to reform when killed -2%. I think that means that there is a small chance every time he dies that he will stay dead. But being immortal is a kind of a big deal for him. He's got excellent stats, and he also has the Mortal Blade, which has the extra effect on damage, Mortal Strike. I'm not sure what that means, what that tag means, but I believe that the Mortal Blade has a Soul Slay effect. Or at least, based on the game, that's what it should have. I guess I can't guarantee that it does, but it's a magic weapon, it hits hard, it has a big attack bonus, so his attack with it is, I think, 20, and it also gives him most of his defense skill. And it has this extra effect the Mortal Strike, which, like I said, I thought that would be a Soul Slay effect, but I don't know that it is. Lady Butterfly. Lady Butterfly is old, unfortunately, but she has Air Shield, she has Glamour, the usual Scale Walls Assassin, Spirit Sight, and Air Magic, plus Nature Magic, so she can cast all kinds of neat spells for you. She's also equipped with 2 Dusk Daggers, so they are, of course, armor negating and piercing, so she can absolutely stab people to death if they are relying on protection. And all her stuff is poisoned. Her shurikens are poisoned, her Dusk Daggers draw blood. I guess all the shurikens are poisoned. Yes, all the shurikens are poisoned. Kingfisher over here is pretty standard, except Kingfisher is a Beastmaster and summons in battle 1d6 random dudes. Wolves, giant spiders, Markata, Vanara, Atavi, archers or infantry, tigers, which are probably the best ones here. Oh, the giant spiders are actually probably... No, those are the little spiders, I guess. They're not the ones that throw webs. Yeah, probably the tigers are the best ones here. Dogs, goats, deer. So they summons 1d6 random animals and is a nature 2 mage. And then you have orangutan. And orangutan is possibly one of the most fascinating because the way orangutan works is orangutan is just a kind of a mediocre berserker assassin, not particularly fast, not particularly good at stuff. Hits hard with an axe, but that's about all, right? However, if orangutan is in a province without a temple, every turn he's in a province without a temple, there is a chance, a random chance, that he will suddenly turn into this, the Demon of Hatred. And the Demon of Hatred is A, uncontrollable. You cannot control it. It will always defect immediately because it has Defector 100. It has the Independent Move ability, so it moves randomly by itself. It's invulnerable, it causes a ton of fear, it has a huge heat aura, and a big fire shield. It is Fire 4, size 6 with 120 hit points, and it's incredibly strong. It has these Burning Claw attacks, which inflict armor-piercing fire damage, and it has the Fire Boulder, which has a Firebrand effect and does a ton of damage when it hits. So, yeah, with Orangutan, I think the 2 ways to use him are either you keep him at home somewhere you have a temple, and basically use him to defensively assassinate, or you launch him directly into enemy territory and wait for him to turn into the Demon of Hatred, and hopefully cause havoc, because in order to stop the Demon of Hatred, you need to be pretty much geared for it. I mean, if it would be pretty easy to build a thug that could fight the Demon of Hatred, or not, at least it wouldn't be trivial, but it wouldn't be super hard. You could also kill him just with mass mage deployment. But the fun thing is, all of these guys can be summoned again after they die. They are unique, but you can just cast the spell again and summon them back for another 21 D-gems. So they don't go away permanently, no matter what, pretty much. In terms of which is most powerful, I think Owl, Lady Butterfly, and Sekiro are definitely more powerful than Orangutan and Kingfisher. But Orangutan and Kingfisher both have interesting qualities, both have interesting little abilities, so they're all fun. Finally, there is one more hero. Should be, I don't know, I forget what he's called. His name is Ishin. Maybe he's not in this version yet. Anyway, Haerdalas has talked to me about Ishin Ashina, the hero for... Yeah, I don't think he's in this version yet. For Ashina, one of the major heroes, and the end boss of the game, actually, is Ishin Ashina, the Sword Saint. And he starts off the game very old, and then later on some magic happens, and he respawns as a young man again, and becomes incredibly dangerous, and you fight him in the final boss fight. But the hero that I think is in the game, but I couldn't find him in the mod inspector just there, is very old, has massive stat penalties for being old, and is likely to die unless you keep an herbalist nearby to stop the diseases. But still has excellent stats, actually, and more importantly, is a massively inspirational leader. It's like leadership 120 at inspirational +3 or something. So an incredibly good general. So worth using just on that basis. In terms of what Ashina does, then, the heroes are cool and all. The summonable sacreds are actually a lot more important to the way the nation works, because the combination of summonable sacreds that are tough and high damage, and Senpo monks, which are recruitable sacreds, which are quite high damage for their price means that leaning on a Bless strategy is probably the most obvious way to use Ashina well. In terms of what Bless to take, you have a lot of options. You can take an Oracle. The Oracle is a great Bless chassis for Water and Astral Blesses. You can take one of the Dragons. The Celestial Dragon gives you Astral, but the Dragon King starts with Water 3. So if you want a very high level Water Bless, the Dragon King might be the way to go. Now, not to beat around the bush, the very high level Water Bless that I'm talking about is Quickness. Because, and the reason I talk about Quickness is because if you take Quickness, actually I think it's still easier to take it on the it's still easier to take it on the Fountain. The reason I talk about Quickness is because Quickness, of course, gives you attack skill, defense skill, and doubles your number of attacks, plus doubles your combat speed, so you're likely to strike first. So with Quickness pushing defense skill up to 16 and attack skill up to 15, anybody with a less than length 3 weapon is likely to get repelled. Anybody with a longer than length 3 weapon is still likely to be deflected by defense skill, and most importantly, most people are probably going to be killed before they get to attack, since Senpo Martial Arts is AP, Golden Spear is piercing. You pretty much have to have about 20 prot in order to be confident of taking minimal damage from Senpo Monk attacks, even if they don't have any added strength. Adding strength, incidentally, is probably also a decent strategy, but if you do that, then you also need something that will increase the protection of the Senpo Monks or otherwise keep them from dying. Quickness does a pretty good job, actually, of keeping them from dying, since with the air shield and as fast as they move, they're very unlikely to be hurt by missiles. The other, if you're going to take Quickness, though, I think you might as well take this guy and add Twist Fate. Twist Fate will suck up that all-important first hit, stop that from going through, and that will give your Senpo Monks time to blend whatever's in front of them. If you take Quickness and Twist Fate, this is kind of a classic elf bless, like Von here is like this kind of bless. Any berserking two-hander or double weapon user likes this kind of bless, like Lava Warriors also like this kind of bless, but although it's hard to take on Abyssia. But if you take this with these Senpo Monks, just because they have these high-quality attacks and high stats, that makes them incredibly effective. It really does. I was surprised when I tested it how effective it made them. Other options. You could take a Monolith. And if you take a Monolith, then you can get the Bark Skin Bless on it. That gives them some prot, which stacks with their decent stats to make them a lot harder to kill. Then you can take, like, Strength of the Earth to give them extra strength so that they hit harder with these attacks. If Senpo Martial Arts is hitting with 10 AP, increasing the damage of their attacks is a very, very nice way to make Senpo Monks dangerous to tougher enemies, because it doesn't take much. I mean, Senpo Martial Arts can punch through even very heavy armor if you just increase strength once or twice. And since you have Earth Magic, you can also spam Strength of Giants on them at some point. So you can take Strength of the Earth. You'd even go like double Strength of the Earth and Bark Skin. That would work okay. That leaves you with neutral scales. So at that point, you can do things like, you know, increase your heat, increase your growth, drop a little bit of misfortune, drop a little bit of turmoil, a little bit of sloth, pump up your magic. I like to pump up magic on this nation because you have a lot of relatively cheap kind of human mages. You have Herbalists, which are 65 gold for 7 RP. You can spam these guys out to research. They can also spam Swarm defensively or offensively, so they're not useless in combat. And 65 gold for 10 research points in Magic 3 is not a bad deal. So you could do something like this. This would also probably work. Other alternatives, you could try to do the Jomon thing that I talked about where I use the Kami of the Sun as an expander. Now, a Fire Shield Fate Weaving Bless. I don't think it's worth it for the Senpo Monks. It would definitely work on the summons, but probably not a good idea still. You could do it, but it would cost you in scale. It would cost you in scales. It would cost you a lot in scales. You'd have to drop those. Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea for you here. I don't think that's a good idea for Ashina. Honestly, in terms of blessing, and I don't say this often because I think the really high level blesses are almost universally overpriced, but looking at the Senpo Monk, I would probably take Quickness if I was going to take a bless. There is, of course, another option. The other option is you take the Oracle Imprisoned and you take really good scales. because if you can take really good scales on Ashina, and you don't need fantastic scales, but you can take like that. You don't really need order or productivity, to be totally honest. But if you do that, then you can take pretty high magic paths, and then you can even add something else in, like maybe you give... you don't really need death. But you could use death to give yourself undead command or something, which wouldn't be a bad bless for your priests. Just take a couple points of undead command, a few points of undying. That'll make your dudes tougher. And then you can take like defense skill, Twist Fate's incarnate only, so you wouldn't take that. You could take arcane finesse, since that will boost your spells from your big Mibu priests, or your big Senpo high priests. Arcane finesse, major magic resistance, something like that. And then when this guy wakes up, you have a big spellcaster, and you've also had great scales the whole time, like 73 design points. I can afford to kick my Dominion up to 6 and still have a point of, say, productivity to increase my resources and my income. So this is also not a bad design. In terms of Awake Expanders, your choices are very limited. Basically, you're down to either one of the dragons, Earth Serpent, or one of the Chinese dragons over here, the Eastern dragons. The Eastern dragons, unfortunately, are pretty bad expanders, so I wouldn't really use either of them for that task. You can go Earth Serpent. Earth Serpent is boring, but relatively effective, as long as you're kind of careful with him. Serpent of Chaos, also effective. Causes fear, has regeneration. Doesn't have any protection, though, so getting it to, like, work in that way is expensive. But if you're willing to sacrifice some of your scales here, you could take, like, a basic bitch Death Force Serpent of Chaos. I would probably just take an Earth 5 or Earth 6 Serpent if I wanted an expander. Earth 6 Hardskin Serpent, 5 Dominion. You have to drop a couple of scales. But that's basically fine. If I was expanding with this guy, I might actually ignore the Sacreds and go 4, Dominion 4, and take a point of Magic or Luck 1, one of the two. Probably Magic 3, I like Magic 3. But this guy could get you basically painless expansion, because with Hardskin plus his Earth Magic, he ends up with Protection, I think Protection 30. And he can just sort of toddle around taking provinces for free. You have okay-ish scales, and you can just concentrate on, instead of recruiting your Sacreds, you concentrate on crossbows and other basic units, and wait for the Sacred Summons to come online. With Hard Skin, the Sacred Summons will be pretty tough, and they'll be able to just kind of wade through things with a little bit of light backup buffing. Or, if you wanted to, you could take Strength of the Earth times 2, and make your Sacreds hit super hard, but I probably would go Hard Skin if I'm expanding with a snake. Dragons, you can expand with dragons too, just, you know, give them a minor buff of some kind on their path. One strategy might be, actually, to take something with nature and take poison resistance on your Sacreds, because that means that when you start casting Foul Vapors with your nature random high Senpo priests, of which half of them will be nature 1, your Sacreds can fight through it, and they can, you know, kind of help clean up the enemy while they're suffering from the Foul Vapors. So, that is Ashina, Fountainhead Waters. I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be super interesting. With the high death magic, there's actually a couple of high death nations in this game. In particular, my competitor in terms of high death is going to be Tecduin, which is, as I said, basically Ermor but elves. So, like, they've got undead She Lords, which are kind of like mini Itimus. They've got undead Tuatha warriors that are as sacreds, like sacred infantry. They've got a lot of very powerful things, and of course they've just got high death magic. If I recall, their one of their units is... Hold up, let me take a gander at late age Tecduin real quick. They should be here somewhere. Oh no, I think I just loaded the Ashina mod. I didn't load the, yeah, I didn't load the full mod. Anyway, they have a Death 4 Mage that they can get very easily, so they will also be competing with me for Well of Misery, among other things. But with Ashina, I feel pretty confident that I can grab Well of Misery. You can do things like summon Catoblepas that you almost never see, although Catoblepas are actually really cool. Streams of Hades with the Coquetiads that are Water 3, Death 3 mages. That's nice. Bishop Fishes. I can go underwater, summon Bishop Fishes, so they will definitely be... I'll have Holy 3 available all over the place. And with my water gem income, I'll be able to forge a lot of water bottles. I'll be able to forge a lot of water booster items. I'll be able to forge amulets of the... Well, I can't really forge amulets of the fish because those require air and water crosspath, which nobody has. But I'll be able to summon Shambler Skin Armor, which lets people go out of water, so Bishop Fish will be able to come out, help claim thrones. With my nature randoms, I'll even be able to cast Naiad Warriors. So I'll have the Kidneys. And all that good stuff. And of course, in terms of enchantment, we have all the good death enchantment spells. We also have Leviathan, which could be... I'm really tempted to go underwater solely to cast Leviathan because I never have. I'm sure it's not worth it, but fuck it, I want to cast it. And then you have the real high-level death spells. Like I said, it's easy for Ashina to get up to Death 5 and Death 6. So Lichcraft, Fields of the... Well, not Fields of the Dead. I don't have any Death Earth crosspath. That's sad, but Life After Death, which is a fantastic battlefield spell. The Ritual of Rebirth to bring heroes back as mummies, which I almost never cast because I don't normally play, nations that have that level of death magic. But it'll be very interesting. It'll be interesting to play a nation that is kind of so focused on specifically these two things. And it'll be interesting to see what I can make out of the troops. Like I said, I think some of these troops are really standouts in terms of effectiveness. Some of them are, like the Ashina Ashigaru are also here. They're, like, decent enough. They're units. You can use them. Nothing bad about them exactly. They just don't stand out the way the Senpo monks and the crossbows and the Nightjar Ninja and these guys do. These guys are, honestly, sort of unassuming, but solid. I like them. Especially if I can, like, drop some body ethereal and stuff on them, I think they'll do good work. In any case, that's me rambling for long enough. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you watching Mirror Point 2 when it comes out. Probably videos will start coming out in, like, I want to say 3 weeks or so, because the game hasn't technically started yet, and of course I won't start posting videos until we hit, like, turn 15, 16, 18, something like that. But look out for that, and I'll see you then. Thank you for watching. Talk to you later.